call your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Now, as usual, to give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it, folks. So let's waste no time. Oh, yeah. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Girard has its heart set on upgrading the Wellman Theater. Girard officials are expecting $300K from the state to revitalize the Wellman Theater. The help, according to a report published June 25th by Bob Copeland, is coming from Ohio Senator Sandra O'Brien. Now, the piece goes on to say that the city also has earmarked $150,000 in American Rescue Plan funds for the theater. Now, at the moment, $300,000 from the state capital appropriations bill would need approval by the Ohio House, Ohio Senate, and Governor's Office. That's word for word, according to the report. Story number 2. Is there hope for Realty Tower? The latest report shows that the owners of Realty Tower may be throwing in the towel, assuring that residents of the Youngstown structure, they basically told them that they have done everything to make downtown Youngstown livable and up to par, but this explosion has put a major dent in their continued service to the city. So they're deciding to tear it down. Now, in what appears to be a number of mixed reports, while the mayor gave a speech talking about filing a lawsuit to find some solutions, and then Councilman Julius Oliver, a Democrat from the 1st Ward, reached out to a Cincinnati-based firm called Structure Systems Repair Group to assess if the building could be stabilized and saved. So there's a lot going on in this report. Now, this is, but then the owners of the building just decided to say, we're tearing her down. Now, this is according to a report published June 21st by Dan Pompley. Now, it appears that this is it. It's looking to, they're just going to do it, and they're just going to say that's it. But other voices from the Historical Society and City Council may be thinking otherwise. So this story is still developing, and it caused a number of local residents to remain unsettled. Story number 3. YSU to get $12.7 million from the state. David Skolnick has an article explaining how the state legislature is expected to vote by Wednesday on a $4.2 billion capital budget. Now, the article goes on to explain how $14 million will be allocated for Mahoning County and $12.7 million of it for Youngstown State University projects. Now, $1 million will go to Trumbull County, according to the report. Now, also, that's also another $1 million. Now, according to the report, this is the purpose of the capital budget fund, which is approved every 2 years by the General Assembly. The report was published June 22nd. It explains every funding project listed if you want to check it out. Story number 4. $1.2 million in grants. 61 nonprofits in Trumbull and Mahoning County are set to receive charity awards of $1.2 million in grants. The money is coming through the Community Foundation of Mahoning Valley. Now, if you're interested in wanting to know more or who will receive a portion of the $1.2 million, there is a staff report out of the Vindicator published June 25th that mentions all of the organizations set to receive this money. Story number 5. Youngstown has gone gun crazy, or has Youngstown gone gun crazy? You hear gunshots in the middle of the night? Somebody could be suffering from some mental problems or anger issues. It almost seems like it's hard to find good news in the city of you. And Runyon has a report published June 25th explaining how 24 shots were fired at two Southside homes, one on Hudson and one on Jean Street. Now, we got the story in as the consistency of gun-related stories staying in circulation in Youngstown. Story number 6, busing plans will be axed in Youngstown. Oh, this is a big story. Several latest news reports show that because of a $2 million fine placed on Youngstown City Schools busing for getting kids to school late, the city has decided to halt high school busing operations. WFMJ has a piece explaining how the district plans to pivot to WRTA buses to get kids to and from school. Now, the entire article shows a system in distress with few options but to downsize. Story number 7 and the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Headed into Independence Day in the city of U. A lot going on, a lot of bad news, but I tell you, there is some good news. And that is that if you find out all the secrets of the universe, figure everything out, you are still dumb and you don't know anything, because it's impossible to know everything. Story number 7. Why the cancellation of the Youngstown Italian Fest is a big thing, big deal. The reality, folks, the reality going on in the heart of downtown Youngstown is the reality that businesses are suffering. That's real. There's reality going on. Most businesses are formed to make money and to serve the community that they open in. That's a fact. At least that's what we think. Now, this is not good news for a community in need of a cash flow. The track record is scary when it comes to Youngstown from the start. So here's a timeline to figure out how this big old mess started. 20 Federal Street tenants were evicted, and they were forced to relocate because of some issues with the downtown, the old, I believe it was Farmore building downtown. I believe that's the old Farmore building, but this is how it all started. Then the city construction that was going on in the city started slowing down business activity, and it got worse. From there. A gas line all of a sudden got cut in the Realty building, causing an explosion on the ground floor and the evacuation of not only the building, but the buildings next door to them. It's become a mess. Now, there's the cancellation of the Youngstown Italian Fest in the headlines, causing more problems. The event was scheduled to take place August 2nd to August 4th on Federal Street downtown, but will be canceled due to safety concerns caused by current events taking place downtown. This is according to the report. Now, this is yet another hit for Youngstown, thus making this a top story. Story number 8, and the top local headline and developing news story that made it this week, when it almost feels like everything is coming to an end. There is hope at the top of the mountain. Even Moses got weary, but we have to be strong. Story number 8. Police officers and emergency crews are busy in Youngstown. June 25th, a staff report out of the Mediator explains how a Youngstown police officer had to use pepper spray on a crowd of people in the rear parking lot of a West Federal Street business. But that's not what got the story in. What got the story in is the fact that the incident happened at 2:13 a.m. The report goes on to explain how the police prevented the entire scenario from getting worse. Then it goes on to say that an hour later, at 3:11 a.m., officers were called to the 500 block of Griffith Street on the north side for a report of a fight with gunfire. The incident involved 7 or 8 people, with most of them being female. That's what the report says. Now, the entire report describes how hard it has been to contain chaos taking place in Youngstown. The story made it in because unsettled spirits are keeping officers in Youngstown very, very busy, and emergency crews have been very, very busy. On June 26, a report surfaced out of WFMJ about how the Boys and Girls Club of Youngstown had to be evacuated after a gun main line was struck near the club. So showing you that there's a lot happening, but when all hell is breaking loose, you got to call on the good Lord for your blessing. Well, folks, those are top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories. Don't you go anywhere. You're the Mediator, me, Brother West. I'm right back.
What does Method8Inc.com Media Center have that I need?
Small prints, event consulting, photography, business consulting, technical consulting, entertainment consulting, fundraising advice, event videography, movies, news, publishing, media, books, entertainment, acting, broadcasting, public relations, access to the visual and performing arts, ink and black ink refills, audio recording, graphic design, theater, minor computer and cell phone repair, and they're located at 5648 Market Street in Boardman, Ohio from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. every Monday through Friday. The list goes on and on.
Method8Inc.com. Buy stuff, watch stuff, or read stuff.
Oh yeah! And yes, we are chipmunks.
Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Folks, headed into Independence Day. The idea of independence has been a great idea for quite some times. I recall a story of a woman who paid off all her bills and she refused to get relationships and she stayed independent. I recall presidents being independent. I recall the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, that we will strive for union memberships and union unity. And we, as a united nation, will remain independent. There's nothing wrong with independent. But the fact is that in God we trust. Yeah. And when all hell is breaking loose across the world, and mountains are crumbling, there is one nation under God, indivisible, yeah, with liberty and justice for all. So in all failures, and as all hell breaks loose, we will rise like the eagles and maintain freedom and justice for all. This Independence Day, baby. Let's waste no time. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Fact checking is at an all-time high. Here's why. Wisconsin Watch has a fact brief asking the question if almost all of the new jobs in the United States are going to illegals. So that's the question in the report. And the answer is no. Not all of the new jobs in America are not going to illegals. That's what the fact check says. But there's a reason why this is important, because the report goes on to explain some stats about the current U.S. labor market, but does not mention some key data points when referring to who is working the hardest. The reason why this is important is that this is important because in the next election, voters will be focusing on the facts and the reality that there is growing uncertainty in the market, especially when it comes to the nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Story number 2. Speaking of fact checking and if it's fake news, the climate change topic is staying in top news, folks. This is the biggest fact check because this is a big debate. Now, the climate change topic is still a hot discussion. This is after a heat wave and several storm records continue to catch the attention of activists. Now, one fact remains a hot topic of discussion, and that is the fact that humans or just time could be causing the Earth to get warmer. That's if it can be proven. But there are even reports saying that there's parts of Earth that are getting cooler. Now, only hard talking points to this debate are the farmers' almanacs. I mean, when you talk about the if you want to fact check if something is actually real, the only fact checking that we have are the almanacs or historical documentation showing that the weather trends just occur. this is that basically saying that the earth just goes through changes. Now, these changes that go on, no civilization have been able to stop, at least from what we know. So can we even stop climate change if it's real? Now, what got the story in is a report out of NPR stating that more than 123 people in the U.S. were under heat alerts recently, and analysts are blaming climate change. Story number 3, the space race just created another chapter in history. China has an entire video and article in The Guardian. The Chang'e 6 lunar probe. The Chang'e, let me make sure I get that right. Chang'e 6 lunar probe has returned with the world's first samples from the far side of the moon. Now, while NASA is discovering new secrets to the entire universe, the universal gears, China took a first look at the dark side of the moon. So this is a first. They got some samples. Now the article goes on to, it's filled. The article is filled. If you check it out, it goes on to show all this stuff about moon stories igniting newfound sparks in the space race. Story number 4, an abortion mess. While women fight for their rights to choose, CNN has an interesting piece explaining how falling fertility rates have long been a concern for economists worried about the labor force, etc. Now, the piece goes on to explain how declining birth rates will permanently alter the demographic makeup of the world's largest economy over the next decade. Now, the simple point is that only a man and a woman can reproduce, and while women are fighting for their rights, they're forgetting one fundamental rule in nature, and that is the fact that we need them to reproduce and mate with the man, to create more people to tend the land. That's a fact. Now, as of March 25th, 2024, if you Google the CDC abortion count, you will find that the system has been busted up since 2021, when they reported 625,978 abortions. That's what people have made, probably more. Now, so while the nation is divided on this issue, at the end of the day, the righteous will conclude that there is a valuable lesson to be learned here. Going into another critical election, Republicans have taken a lot of losses at the election ballot on this issue, but the data shows that they may have a point worth fighting for. That means that the point that maybe people should try just to not make that choice. If they make that choice, then maybe they should decide otherwise. I don't know. Bad is good, good is bad. Who knows? This story is staying alive. And Donald Trump may have a lot of enemies, but I will say this. But he took a hard stance on abortion, which makes him an unlikely hero even for black folks. But it's hard to admit, because he has a lot of enemies. Now, this is now he may be shying away from this fight, but it could cost him an army of heroes, if you understand what that says. That may say he took a stance, now he may be backing away, but that unlikely hero may have made a right choice. I'm sure you get choices. I'm sure you make it. Well, for our top 4 international headlines developing news stories, if this makes sense, I'm right back with the top 4. Donald Trump, a hero. Never thought, but so don't go anywhere. You're the media. Me, Brian West. Donald Trump saved lives. Big headlines. Tune in to Method A's YouTube channel to check out the top interviews that made it throughout the years and months. Visit method8inc.com. Check out all the community interviews if you want to check it out. Method8inc.com. Buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Oh, yeah. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. It's Independence Day weekend, so we have to ask ourselves the big question of what would the world be like without the good old USA, baby. God bless the USA. And then we go on to our song of greatness of a country so deeply rooted in the splendid nature of freedom and redemption. Everybody's searching for that something. Searching for the rulers of the world. But there's a special thing. We're flying without wings. Woo! God bless the USA. Freedom and justice for all. Happy Independence Day weekend. Be thankful. Brian says there's something special about freedom. Let's waste no time, folks. And justice for all. Independence. If you're independent, hug somebody. We need somebody. We love somebody. But we can stay independent, baby. And let's waste no time. Let's get to it. Story number 5. Assessing the war on drugs. Speaking of independence, Brian, have you been doing some drugs? No, I haven't. But I have to take drugs to keep my health and my mental right. Everybody's on some type of drugs. DW has a headline stating that the U.S. war on drugs has been a complete failure. The report by John Shelton, published June 25th, shows a UN High Commissioner for Human Rights calling the campaign a clear failure. The report is extensive and even cites the negative impact that current policies have had in the 50-year war on drugs. If you did not know, the United States led global war on drugs was declared by then President Richard Nixon on June 17th of 1971. We're now in 2024, so that was 53 years ago. Thus, making this a top story. What got the story in is the current news and circulation about marijuana pardons. Thus, making this a top story and staying alive. Story number 6, 34 trillion and counting. A country founded on debt must have invented a system to master it. Fortune has a piece explaining how the national debt is over $34 trillion. The article goes on to say that it's time to tell the truth about the U.S. government's finances. This article is a must-read for getting an understanding of how America has been on a printing and spending blast that is rooted inside of its foundation. Talk about independence. Now, the shocking truth about this article is that the annual deficit from 2002 to 2023 averaged out to about 5% over the 2 decades that got this. When we talk about the spending boost, so the stat is basic. It just says averaging over 2 decades about 5%. But the spending boost came under President Obama. That means that Obama was the president who just decided to spend more. I hope that makes sense. Doing my best. Now, the article goes on to say that under his administration, the deficit was doubled from the Congressional Budget Office's original projection, and goes on to say that Trump and Biden were no different. They added more. They just started spending away. Spend it. The article points out some solutions, though, but the article also succeeds at keeping the deficit in the headline, basically making it a hot topic. Now, the debate now is how important is this issue when there are so many different theories and opinions when it comes to the American money and how America spends its money. That's why story number 6 made this week. Also made it to the top 2 because the $34 trillion and counting. How do you account for a system that you created? Big hell. Story number 7 and the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made this week. The Surgeon General has made a declaration against guns. Stat has a headline by Annalisa Morelli, published June 25th, explaining how the Surgeon General has declared gun violence a public health crisis. Now, here's why. Gun violence has now become the leading cause of death among kids and teens. There's been more than 4,600 deaths of kids under the age of 19. If you did not know that, 54% of all American adults say they have a relative who has experienced some type of firearm-related incident. I mean, a lot of people have been affected. About 60% of Americans are worried about losing someone they care about to gun violence. This is in the report. This is all according to Vivek Murthy, the current U.S. Surgeon Vivek Murthy, the current U.S. Surgeon General. He basically puts this all in the report, thus making this a top story. I always made it to the top this week because the gun stories are bad. Big headline. Story number 8 in the top international headline and developing news story that made this week, headed into Independence Day. Story number 8. This is a big headline. Has Israel's war with Hamas gotten out of hand? Starvation of Palestinians. Brutal images of wounded civilians, with one image even showing a man bloody and strapped to an Israeli military vehicle. This is all according to The Guardian, which goes on to state growing escalation between Israel, Hezbollah, and Iranian forces. Talks of a Palestinian statehood have also been reported because of the carnage. A surge in anti-Semitism on college campuses has stayed in the headlines. A report in the Washington Post headline stating that 22 people are dead in a tent camp near ICRC office in Gaza. Reuters has a headline stating that a German minister is warning of an all-out Middle Eastern war. There are also reports of protests and strife within Netanyahu's cabinet due to draft talks, etc. Folks, if you want to answer the question of has Israel's war gotten out of hand with Hamas, the answer is yes. Israel's war has gotten out of hand, folks, and it is spreading into the fact that some people may be even doubting their faith, but we got to keep our hope in the Lord because He will bless us. Well, folks, our top 8 local and international headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of doing the research. As usual, I thank all the news outlets, the journalists, the people on the front lines. You deserve all the credit. I'm just the Mediator, the man in the middle, searching for a place to call home and a story to tell. Well, folks, I'm out here. I'll be back next week looking through over 200 or more stories just to keep you informed. If you want to show us some support here at Method 8, it doesn't take much. All you do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program, or you can stop at the store at 5648 Market Street. See my smiling face. Happy Independence Day. Happy Independence Day, folks. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator. Me, Brian West. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.